So my name's Justine and I am the Veterinary Services Manager at Marwell Zoo, which is a large zoo in Hampshire in South UK. I'm also the Junior Vice President of the British Veterinary Association, a post that I just started recently. So I'm very excited about both of these roles. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how I became a zoo vet and my path to get this sort of job, and just touch on getting into the field of working with wildlife and wild species. So for me, I'd always dreamed of being a vet, like many vets. I, from a very young age, wanted every pet that I could possibly have, but it took me many years to get really any of them. But I worked really hard through school. I was very committed to this path. I took a Saturday job at the vets in my teenage years, just for a couple of hours on Saturday mornings, really to open my eyes about what it was really like to be a vet, and what was involved. I also did further work experience both on farms, so dairy farms, at riding stables, and also at other veterinary practices. And I spent a summer in a research lab looking at animal genetics and some of the genetic testing that could be done. And I think this gave me a really good breadth of the sorts of work that vets do, both in clinical and non-clinical roles. I also finally got dogs and cats, and we bred my dogs once and had a bunch of puppies, which was really fun. So I had experience of raising those and taking them to some parties, puppy parties and that sort of thing, and had a rabbit and a guinea pig and that sort of thing. So really enjoyed getting to know those animals as pets and learning about what it could involve being a vet. I was really lucky then to get a place at Bristol Vet School, where I went and graduated in 2008. So I did my final year elective, which is about a month's long course, specialised at the end of final year, studying something in particular, and I chose to go to Bristol Zoo for that. So it gave me a really good flavour of what it was like to actually work as a vet in a zoo, which is quite different from a vet in practice. During my degree, I also did a sandwich degree in veterinary pathology in London. So that gave me a lot of new skills around pathology, which was helpful for my future career with wildlife as well. But once I graduated, I knew I needed to get some experience of actually being a vet with all this knowledge behind me. So I spent the first 5 years in mixed practice, although before I started my job, I did go traveling with some friends and we spent a few months in Central and South America volunteering in wildlife rehabilitation centres and sea turtle rescue sanctuaries and that sort of thing. So that was very exciting too. But those 5 years of mixed practice, I was working with all domestic species and really gave me a good grounding in the breadth of different animals that I may encounter in a future career as a zoo or wildlife vet. During this time, I was also saving up to do a master's and managed to get a place on the Masters in Wild Animal Health, which was run at the Royal Vet College in London. And again, I was really fantastically lucky to get a research project that involved going out to Botswana and trapping some wild cheetahs that lived on farmlands there and putting some tracking collars on so we could see how they interacted with both the calves and the cattle farms there and the wildlife. So that was an amazing experience. I then stayed on in London for a few months working for the Zoological Society of London at London Zoo, looking into diseases for native species and their reintroduction. So lots of small species, invertebrate, small mammals and reptiles, so things like adders, also corncrakes, dormice, red kites, lots of native species that we're trying to boost the populations of. So that was really great too. And then the job came up at Marwell Zoo and I managed to start there in 2015 and have been there ever since, and now lead the vet team, which is a brilliant experience. So what's it like being a zoo vet compared to another type of vet? Well, there is some clinical work. We tend to do a couple of procedures that involve anaesthetizing animals every week. It's really a lot less than in practice because on the whole, the animal's very fit and healthy and don't need so much interventions. But there is a real focus on the preventative health. So we do a lot of health screening, worming, vaccinations, and making sure that the husbandry and the management is as perfect as it can possibly be. And there's a real focus on maximising the welfare, the positive welfare of these animals in the zoo, and trying to make their environment as changeable and enriching as possible. A lot of these animals, when you work in a conservation-focused zoo like mine, are part of international breeding programs. So the animals are moved around the world occasionally as part of international breeding. So hopefully you can get very good populations in captivity. So if those species do go extinct in the wild, the zoos can then reintroduce them back and this sort of save the species. So we do import and export disease testing for those sorts of cases. So this might be blood sampling, maybe TB testing, tuberculosis testing on healthy animals, but just to make sure they're fit and healthy before they go to their new home. There's quite a lot of office work as well. So this could be research work, managerial work in my case, and also practice management. So zoos tend to have very small vet teams. Often there's not even a vet on site, and the vets come and visit from local practices. But the bigger zoos tend to have vets on site. But you have to manage the practice as well, do all the legislative things around medicines use, etc. There's quite a few meetings, and then a highlight is teaching students as well. So we work with one of the vet schools, which is Surrey University, and lecture on their course, and they come out to the zoo as well. So some of the pros and cons, if you're thinking of being a vet and want to go down the route of wildlife or zoo work, so the pros, obviously, really interesting cases and amazing animals. It's such a privilege to work with these animals, and I never forget that. It's just wonderful every day. But there is this heavy focus on preventive medicine, which means actually a lot of your work is quite hands-off. So it's very rare we do surgery, very rare we get a high number of sick animals, which is very unusual compared to practice. You have the real ability to positively improve the lives of these animals and maximise their welfare, which is something our zoo is really passionate about. And you can contribute to the conservation and research work, as well as teaching students and the next generation of vets and zoo vets. You also get to be involved with animal training. So we train our animals a lot to facilitate their care. So this might be training them to have an injection, so you don't need to dart them. It might be training them to open their mouth so you can examine their teeth without having to anaesthetize them. So all of this, again, massively helpful for their welfare, reducing their stresses and minimizing the need for anaesthetics. We're also involved in enrichment, so how we design their enclosures to be as enriching, as changeable as possible. So this might be planting them so that certain flowers blossom at certain times of year that the animals can then eat, or maybe with water features that the animals can use that change over time. And that's great to be involved with that too. And then one of the most rewarding parts is reintroductions. So I've been involved with reintroductions of a few species, including scimitar horned oryx, which are these very beautiful oryx antelope species that were extinct, completely extinct in the wild, that the zoos have managed to reintroduce as part of an international collaborative program. So that's been wonderful. We've sent some of our oryx out there, and then their offspring are now breeding back in the wild, and it's a great success story. Some of the disadvantages of being a zoo vet, so that zoo vets unfortunately don't get paid very much, and you do have very high responsibilities. It can be a lot less clinical, a bit less hands-on, because you've got that focus on the preventative health. So there's a bit more paperwork, more office work, and it can be really quite dangerous sometimes. Obviously, we try and make it as safe as we possibly can, but we are working with, highly dangerous animals and sometimes highly dangerous medications as well. And then there's a fair number of ethical dilemmas, as with any vet in practice. So you have to think about quality of life and the welfare of these animals, and how you can even assess that for some of the species. So, for example, fish, invertebrate, some of the marine species, it's really hard to know if you're giving them the best possible life and how they're experiencing things when it's very hard to assess welfare. And so that's an area we're researching and hope to be able to help us in the future with those judgments. And also things like contraception. Should you be contracepting animals or letting them breed naturally? If you let them breed naturally, then what can you do with the offspring if there's nowhere for them to go? So often some conundrums, but it's great to be involved in that decision-making process and really ensure the animals are the priority and being thought of first of all. So some advice for you if you want to become a zoo vet. So to start with, just focus on becoming a vet. So focus on getting into vet school. So obviously study hard, find some mentors, some people who can give you advice, do your work experience, volunteer where you can, help out with animals, potentially some research experience as well can be really helpful, and build up some contacts and networks, and really talk to people about their experience and how they got into vet school as well. Then hopefully you'll get in, and once you eventually become a vet after many years of hard studying but lots of fun, I would definitely advise you to get your groundings in domestic species work as a vet first to learn those basic skills, because you'll need to have the high caseload to learn your surgery, how you handle the client, how you approach different species, and work with a variety of different domestic species will help you with then the huge variety of zoo species. But look out for opportunities. So be the vet that volunteers for the weird and wonderful creatures that come in through your doors in your normal surgery. So volunteer to look after that chicken or the bird or another bird or a snake or the skunk. We had reindeer in my old practice. So be the one to volunteer, because a lot of your peers don't want these cases. But just approach them as you would, and do call local zoo vets and exotic vets, and they'll always be very happy to give you advice. Think about some voluntary work experience, so maybe working abroad or at local wildlife centres, and really keep trying. If you're passionate about this as a career path, you can get there, and it's very rewarding. So definitely keep going. There's more and more jobs at zoos available, and I wish you all the best of luck. And we'll save questions, I think, to the end, but very happy to answer them at any point.
Just try and share my screen.
Great. So next, I'll hand over to Jack. So Jack's a veterinary nurse, and he's going to be talking to you about his career path as well.
I think you might have to share it because it's not working again.
Okay, give me a second.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, it's slightly small. I'll have to do it off my screen. So, hi everyone, I'm Jack and I'm a registered veterinary nurse. So if you could click on to the next slide, and that'll be the bit that's about me. That'd be great. So I qualified in 2018, and that involves being registered with the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. I work in a small animal hospital based in Norfolk and mainly deal with emergency and critical care, which is all out of hours work, so I only work nights. So my role as a registered veterinary nurse is slightly different to that of someone who works during the day sometimes. I'm also a member of the British Veterinary Nursing Association, and I'm on the council, which involves trying to promote veterinary nurses throughout the country and just trying to further our profession as well in terms of development for animal welfare as well. I have quite a few interests, which aren't limited to the ones that I've listed, which I have a huge passion for ultrasonography, which crosses over into human and sort of animal work. I enjoy anaesthesia and also exotics and emergency and critical care, and I'm currently undertaking my certificate to gain further knowledge in emergency and critical care. And I'm also passionate about promoting the role of the veterinary nurse in terms of getting people to do as much as they possibly can within their code of conduct. And I've always had a passion for animals from a very young age and own a dog and about 30 tortoises. So there's quite a few animals in our household. Next slide, please. So a day in the life of a veterinary nurse is quite varied. So there's some on the list that I don't get a chance to do because I work nights, so we don't do routine procedures. It's all emergency work. But for sort of regular veterinary nurse day would be admitting patients for procedures. So that would involve routine neutering and other operations that would be carried out during the daytime. Running laboratory tests and diagnostics, scrubbing into surgeries, monitoring anaesthesia while the vet is operating, and just keeping an eye that everything is going okay and adjusting things if they need to be, working with the vet in charge of the anaesthetic. Control and restraint on patients as well, so allowing for us to do things such as place IV catheters or things like urinary catheters and take blood samples as well. And then it goes on to further things as well. So some of the photos you'll see that I've added, so things like taking blood samples for donations, as well as quite a regular occurrence in my emergency and critical care field. It's something that we have to do on a regular basis as a life-saving treatment. Next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. And so it involves a lot of inpatient care. So we have a lot of hospitalised patients on a day-to-day basis, administering medications to those that are in our hospital, things like physiotherapy, taking radiographs as well, and also there's some quite fun parts in terms of like delivering and resuscitating puppies and kittens, which always goes down well with the whole team as well. So next slide, please. So what veterinary nurses do, there's an image that I've attached, but there's so much that's involved in our job on a day-to-day basis. It's quite a rewarding career path, and working at the front line and having an impact on animal health and the patient care is something that really makes an impact on people who own animals and also everyone involved within the veterinary surgery. I've also gone through the tasks that have sort of we do take part on every single day. And also we can carry out minor surgical procedures within the code of conduct as a registered veterinary nurse as well. And we also work within the vet-led team in clinical practice, which is currently developing as we go on. So there's more and more different structures coming forward and more postgraduate qualifications that enable us to develop our career as a rewarding path in veterinary nursing. Next slide, please. So I briefly touched on furthering our skills and knowledge as an RVN. So it's an ongoing path in any medical profession with things that constantly develop. We're always learning more, and as an RVN, 15 hours of continued professional development are required each year to maintain our registration. Things like that can be such as the ultrasound day I completed last year. Since then, it's initiated my passion for ultrasound, and you can just follow whichever path that you really enjoy. Next slide, please. So why did I choose veterinary nursing? I chose veterinary nursing because I feel it's a forever developing career path, like anything within medicine. It's highly rewarding. You never know what's going to walk through the door next. Who knows what is going to call up throughout the night and come in. We sometimes get, as you can see, like baby deers come in, and also some not so quite pleasant sort of things that we get coming as well. But the emergency and critical care aspect of it is quite a buzz for myself. The possibilities and opportunity for development are absolutely endless. There's so many pathways that you can pursue. So once you become an RVN, not necessarily working in clinical practice only. There's so many more developments that you can look for and expand your network as well. And like I said before, no day is the same. The variety of species we get to see and treat is huge. So, next slide, please. So there are multiple ways to pursue your career in veterinary nursing if you're interested in that. And I took the level 3 diploma work-based apprenticeship style route. There is a degree route as well, with block placements to complete along the way and to complete practical skills in the NPL log, which is a practical log of all the skills that you need for day one competencies. Work experience and know what is involved in the day-to-day working of a veterinary practice is extremely valuable. Unfortunately, it's not all cuddling puppies and kittens. We do that some of the time, but it is quite a fast-paced, stressful environment, and you have to be able to work within a team as well. So knowing the reality of a veterinary practice is quite a good insight before pursuing your career, but it is one that I would definitely recommend. So you can also research the pathways to achieve becoming an RVN. So there's several different routes. So if you get knocked back once, don't just give up. There are plenty of potential ways. My road was far from smooth in becoming an RVN, but I got there in the end. So if I can do it, anyone can. So check out the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons website and the BVNA websites, and there's also the website for the VN Futures as well, which is a new initiative in terms of sort of promoting vet nursing. Next slide, please. So there's some further tips for getting into veterinary nursing. So one of them, obviously I've spoken about previously, was work experience. That's absolutely invaluable to be able to say that you've worked in a veterinary practice. Just gaining experience so they know that you are happy in terms of what goes on. They can be quite difficult to come by, so just don't give up in terms of applying for work experience. Show willing and sort of even other aspects in terms of working in kennels and just gaining that experience as well. Speak to local colleges and your course providers to see what entry requirements they require. There may be access courses such as the animal nursing assistant qualification before getting into vet nursing. And the biggest thing is ask questions and be prepared to learn, and don't be afraid to ask what's going on. I know when I was on work experience, I just sort of stood in the corner sometimes. I would be too scared to ask because I felt silly, but no question is too silly. And just persevere. So you will face several challenges on the way. I think everyone does, but they just make you the nurse or vet that you are today. So, and next slide, please. And there's just a few links to get involved if you wanted to pursue a career in veterinary or veterinary nursing. So I'm contactable on my social medias, or there is also the BVNA, which is the voice of veterinary nursing, and also the RCVS is the regulatory body for veterinary, and also the VN Futures is the new initiative that I spoke about earlier, which is definitely worth looking at. Thank you.
Hi. Do I just go right ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Hi everyone. I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully, and we can get started. Okay, so can you all see that?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Right, okay, so I thought what I would do is to share a day in the life of a small animal vet with you. So hi, I'm Mantissa Green. I'm a small animal vet, and I'm also currently the president of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. And I was asked today to share my career, so my small animal vet career, and I thought the best way to really explain that would be to share with you a typical day in the life of a small animal vet. And when I was thinking about it, I realized there was no typical day in the life of a small animal vet. So as everyone has shared with you, as Justine and Jack have shared with you, our lives are very varied. What comes through the door every day is very varied. The problems that we approach every day are very different. And there's no telling when you go in to work what you're going to face that day. So it's really important to be able to be flexible and to adjust. And so I thought, really what I wanted to share with you are the skills I use in a typical day. And so I'm going to talk you through, kind of talking through a a case that I have seen, and the typical skills that I would use, and really to say the skills that I would use are communication skills. I use my clinical skills, which are my medical and surgical skills. I also use my leadership skills, teamwork, and also there's this one skill that people don't talk about quite a lot, but it's really important, which is your intuition or your gut feeling. And well, that can also be kind of seen as pattern recognition as well. So if you see it enough times, then it's likely to be what you've seen before. So as I go through this, then if you kind of look at the scenario that I'm describing and see maybe which skills you think I can use. So, okay, so my typical day in practice starts with me. So can you see my slides okay? I'm just checking because I can see them. Yes, you can see them. Okay, so my typical day in practice starts, so my day starts at 9 o'clock, and I usually arrive to work at 5 to 9, and just walk into my room and get started on my computer to log myself on. And I can usually see there's 2 or 3 patients waiting, and my job at that stage is to look through the list of patients and see which one needs my attention most urgently. And so on this particular day, on this typical day, one of the patients waiting for me is called Henry, and he is a 2-year-old Labrador, and he came to me, he's waiting to see me because he's been at the overnight vets, emergency vets overnight, because he has been vomiting. He is waiting, and also there are other patients waiting to be seen, to be given vaccinations, and with other skin conditions. So I choose Henry first because he is the one that seems to be most urgent. So Henry comes in, and his owner starts explaining to me that he went to the vet the night before because he vomited 5 times. He is really tired. He's not like himself at all. Really sleepy. He refuses to eat. So he's been at the vet overnight, and they have done x-rays, and they have done an ultrasound examination, which is just to scan his belly. I think Jack spoke about ultrasounding as well. Scan to see if there's any fluid in the abdomen of the animal in his belly, and they haven't seen anything abnormal. So they've given him some medication to stop him from vomiting. So he stops vomiting, but he's still not eating, and he's still looking very sorry for himself. And his owners are convinced that something else is going on. So at this stage, I have to start using some pattern recognition skills. So everything medically tells me that nothing is wrong because the vets who've seen him have done all the necessary tests, and they've said nothing's wrong. But the owners are still very worried. And what more can I do? So I discussed with the owners about taking Henry into the hospital, into the practice, and to maybe do another x-ray on him and see if things have moved on a bit, and to continue giving him some fluids because he's been on fluids and painkillers, and just give him some treatment and some TLC and see if that helps. The 2 things that could possibly be wrong with Henry at this stage, in my mind. So one is that he could have eaten something he shouldn't have, and it's causing some irritation in his. So there's inflammation going on, particularly in an organ called the pancreas. The other thing is he could have eaten something he shouldn't have, and it's stuck. And if it's stuck, then the result is that he has to have surgery to remove it. So I explained to his owners at this stage, these are the things that my pattern recognition system in my mind is going through, and we're going to have to eliminate 1 or 2 of the options. So I'm going to x-ray him just to see if that's a possibility, if I can see any gas sometimes builds up in the tummy, and to see if the gas is built up any more than when he was at the vets previously. So Henry comes in, and I hand him over to my veterinary nursing team. So this is where the teamwork starts coming in. So this is the first appointment of my day. I have to go back and do some more consultations. So I hand Henry over to the veterinary nursing team, which is a very diverse team, male and female, and we have people getting involved in helping Henry be comfortable, making sure he has a nice comfy bed, making sure that they take all take his temperature and check his, make sure that his fluids are running at a really nice rate. It's not going too fast or too slow. So checking his speed, the speed of the fluids, and just checking that he's really comfortable. In the meantime, whilst they do that, I go back to consulting. So I have to go back and at this stage see the dog that's waiting on the booster, the dog with the skin condition, and some other animals that are coming in for other routine problems. So I do all of that, and these are some of the other appointments. So one of them would be a dog with an eye condition, for example, and seeing all these other conditions whilst Henry's in the back waiting on me to finish my consultations, but in the really, really good hands of my veterinary nursing colleagues. So I come through at the end of all my consultations, and my excellent veterinary nursing team have already x-rayed Henry. So there's an x-ray sitting there waiting for me. He was so poorly that they were able to x-ray him without giving him any drugs to sedate him. And so I'm looking at this x-ray, and I look at it, and there's a problem in that I can see no problem. So I'm looking at this x-ray and I cannot see anything abnormal at all. And that's something that you're sometimes going to be faced with in veterinary, in the veterinary profession. So sometimes everything looks normal. So a decision has to be made at this stage. I can't see anything abnormal. I'm thinking there's two possibilities in my mind. It could be that he has an inflammation. It could be that something's stuck. And I have to make a decision. Now, this is where intuition and gut feeling comes in. My gut feeling is Henry's eaten something, because his owners have said he usually picks up things when he's on a walk and they're not sure, and he's eaten something. It could be that he's eaten something and it's an inflammation, or he's eaten something and it's blocking him. So I'm thinking he's eaten something and it's blocking him. I call his owners and I say, look, I can't see anything on the x-ray and we have to make a decision here. My job at that stage is to tell them everything that could go right and also everything that could go wrong, and give it to them to make the decision what they would like to do. So his owners make the decision that they would like to go ahead with the surgery. And so we go ahead with the surgery. So I, at this stage, have to calculate all the drugs. So I put math matters, because my children are always telling me, when will I ever use math? You will. So you have to work out the dosage of all the drugs that I need to use for Henry. And in the meantime, my wonderful nursing team goes ahead and starts preparing the theatre to make sure that everything is nice and sterile, and I can go ahead and operate on Henry. So Henry's, so I put this here. So I have to open Henry up and look all the way from his stomach right the way down to his large intestine. I won't get as far as his anus and anal glands as are showing here. I need to get as far as possible, kind of feeling through all of his gut to see if I could find anything stuck in there. So I open Henry up, and this is what I would see. And so I pull up his guts and I start searching. So it's called like running the bowels. And so I start running the bowels through to see if I could possibly find anything wrong. And I start at the stomach, and it's all fine, it's all good, all normal, until I get halfway, and there it is. It's inflamed and it's red, and it looks really bad, and I have to cut a bit of his bowels out and restitch the good parts, the healthy parts together. So I cut a bit of his bowels out, and I have to restitch the healthy parts together. So Henry's recovering from surgery. So at this stage, he still has a tube in, and I would then, at that stage, leave him to call his owners and just let them know that surgery was successful. There was something indeed inside of Henry, and it was corn on the cob. So removed a bit of old corn on the cob that they reckon he'd eaten at least 3 weeks before, and stitched his guts together. Left him at this stage, recovered, and he was awake, but not looking 100%, like he was happy still. But it's time for me to take a break. So he has had his tube out, he is recovered, he is well and conscious, and I can leave at this stage. He'll have a break, and usually I would have at least an hour for lunch on a typical day, and Jack and Justine can tell you there's no such thing as a typical day. Sometimes you get 5 minutes, sometimes you get 2 hours, it depends. So on a typical day, I would then have a break with Henry being awake and recovered, and then I would come back to consult. I come back and find Henry. I use the same picture because I come back and find Henry pretty much how I left him. No further on, and he is refusing to eat. I really want to make sure that he can eat because he's a Labrador. They love to eat, and we're trying him with something like baby rice and chicken just to see if he will eat anything, and he won't eat. And so I then have to leave him in the capable hands of my veterinary nursing team and go on and do my consultation. So I go on to do lots of consultations. I spend the afternoon from about 4 o'clock to 6:45 consulting and seeing other patients for different reasons. So that's a variety of what I would see. And then my last appointment of the evening is Henry. And Henry's owners are coming to collect him, and they are very happy that I found something inside of him, but they would like to take him home. Now, I don't want Henry to go home. I want him to go to the same place that he came from, so an out-of-hours hospital, an emergency hospital like where Jack works, because I need to know that somebody's keeping an eye on him because he's just not as bright as he possibly could be. And so this is where leadership skills come in, because it is my job. Henry's owners are my clients, and Henry is my patient, and it is my job to make sure his owners understand why I feel it's really important that Henry goes to the out-of-hours vets, emergency vets. So I have this conversation, and his owners decide that, yes, okay, they will take him because it's probably better. We don't know how much pain he is. He still hasn't eaten. And yeah, it's better for him to be there. So I leave them at this stage. They go to the emergency hospital. I go home. I go home at that stage, not knowing what's going to happen to Henry. I don't know what is going to happen overnight. I don't know how he's going to be, but I know that I can sleep really, really well, knowing that I've done the best that I could possibly do. And I think that really, for me, sums up a day in the life of a vet, because we don't always have the answers. We don't always know how it's going to turn out. But I think what we do know is that if we give it the best that we can do, then we sleep really comfortably at night, knowing that we've just done that. That's me and the day in the life of a vet, and those are my social media handles, and I think we are ready for any questions. Thank you.
There was some people who asked earlier about what qualifications did you have to achieve your job?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think it's changed a little bit since I was doing A-levels back in the day. But to get into vet school at the time, we needed, I think, 2 A's and a B. But I think maybe Mandisa, you know more about qualifications these days.
Yeah, I think it varies. I think that there is. It's not as strict as when we went to vet school, and I think certainly a science A-level is usually advantageous. I think the best thing to do would be to check the different vet schools, because they have different programs, and some have gateway access where you don't have to do, or you don't have to get really high A-levels, and you can go in and maybe do a foundation course. So there are different ways and routes of getting into vet schools. So maybe check the different vet schools and see what there are available.
And then
I've seen
interview tips as well.
I've seen a question on advice about getting work experience during COVID, especially sort of under 18 age-wise as well. I mean, it's very hard at the moment for everyone. all vets would love to be able to offer more work experience, even to students that are already in vet school, but it's just a real struggle. So I think keep checking in, and we'll see how things go over the next few months, but it may be that it's just not available at the moment, which is a real shame, but unfortunately there's not a lot anyone can do about it at the moment. But
yeah, and I would say too, maybe broaden your horizons a little bit in terms of going to vets. Not necessarily only about going to vets, but getting animal handling experience. And so it might be that you can go to some stables and give a hand to go to kennels or cattery. And so it's actually just being able to say that you can handle animals. And some people actually at this time may be losing some of their staff due to illness or other things. And so it might be worthwhile just giving a call out to your local charities and seeing if anybody needs a hand to help out with animal handling. So that might be worthwhile.
Right, then we've had a few questions around interview tips for people who've already got interviews coming up. So number one, good luck. I think, just always listen really carefully to the questions. I think just, take a breath, think about what they've asked. And if you don't know the answer, just try and work through some of the principles that you do know, or a similar answer to, if they're asking you about a particular scenario, maybe explain a scenario that you have encountered. Remember, they're there to try and ask you about your curiosity and how you think, as much as knowing whether your answers are right or wrong. So do always try and answer the question or explore possible answers, because that should give you some credit.
Yeah, and I think too, one, being as authentic as you possibly can, so they want to know that you, as you are going to be able to do the course, and so just be yourself as much as you can be. But also, as I learned when I did my interview, they don't care about nostalgia. Like, they don't care that you love animals. Like, it's not, you can go and go, I love animals, but that's not really what they want to hear. They want to know that you considered the profession, you understand what it involves, and that you really still want to do it. So that you understand things like, in this profession we have to put animals to sleep, and that you're okay with that. That's really important, because some people get to the end of the course and get really uncomfortable with that stuff. They really want to know that you have the mettle to deal with all the different aspects of the course, of the uncertainty, the sadness of it, that there are certain angles that you need to be able to say that you've actually considered all of it.
I just reiterate that from a veterinary nursing point of view in terms of interviews as well, if anyone's looking to go to colleges for that, knowing what you're getting yourself into and what the job actually entails. So obviously work experience is a great way of doing that, but not at the moment in terms of that, but just finding out what the job entails on a day-to-day basis, that there are some extremely difficult days, but yeah, and that you can commit to doing the course, because it is hard work regardless of what route you take.
Absolutely. I think that might be this one. Exotic, would you say there are many opportunities to travel in exotic works?
Yeah, so I think it depends. There definitely can be. For example, in my job, I tend to just work at the zoo for the zoo animals. There are occasional conferences that may involve a bit of travel, although not at the moment, obviously. And I've managed to get out to do some wildlife work once with my current job, but it's definitely not a norm for me. But there are exotics vets and wildlife vets who their whole job is just going out to different countries, helping with certain projects or conservation work in every single continent across the globe. So there's definitely potential for that. I would say definitely yes, although there's not a huge number of those jobs. If that's something you're really passionate about, there's definitely scope for that. Yeah.
People have asked what the highlight of your career is as well. I think I've got a few. I think it's difficult to pick one. Obviously the biggest one would be to qualify, which I've done and had my graduation day at the London Zoo. Second one is probably joining BVNA Council and being elected onto the council by fellow sort of vet nurses throughout the country, and sort of being put in that position to sort of represent them there. And the third one's probably more of a clinical case of a dog that came in that was choking on a biscuit that the whole team managed to rally around, and it died on the table, but then, well, didn't die. We managed to get it back. And everyone in the whole team sort of like joined together and used every single part of their skill, I think, that day. And now the dog's doing absolutely fine now. And that's a few years ago. And I still get updates from the owner on how the dog's doing. So that was quite a proud moment in our career as well. So, yeah.
Justine?
Yeah, for me, again, there's probably a few. I mean, it's so varied, like Jack said, it's so hard to pick. But a few highlights for me would be, I mean, I definitely felt really really sort of happy and proud to be involved with the reintroduction of those oryx that went to now breed back in the wild, because they were a species that were completely extinct in the wild. And although my part was very small in that whole process, it just felt like this is what I'm doing this for. So that was a great highlight for me. I think as well, becoming the junior vice president of the British Veterinary Association has been a great new embarkment for me, and I'm really excited to be able to support the profession, but also, you know, maximise animal welfare, work towards getting more vets to think about animal welfare for lots of different species, and doing what we can to just drive things forward in all contexts. So yeah, really excited about those two. Mandisa?
For me, becoming the president of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, I think would be the highlight. But in terms of my animal handling bit, my vetting day-to-day job, I think anything that has resulted in life. So anything when I was doing cesarean sections and you have puppies, you're birthing live puppies, and you go from kind of having a situation that's really stressful and really very high risk to end up having all these beautiful puppies just crawling on each other and making these little noises. And it's just, those to me are the highlights of my career. And also any day that I finish work and I think, especially when it's with Henry, where I was able to use my own intuition and it works out all right. Those are always highlight days. So yeah. I think someone's asking, I think we've had quite a few questions about recommending books to help with veterinary studies and issues that interviewees should research. And I certainly think looking at the veterinary press, actually, so like the In Practice and Vet Times and Vet Record and the free stuff that people can have access to is really quite good. So there are, for those of you listening, there are veterinary media, some veterinary newspapers and journals that are around, that if you can get those will tell you what is topical at the moment and what the veterinary profession is talking about generally, and those will be kind of topical issues that, especially if you're preparing for interviews, that those will be topical issues that the profession is dealing with.
Yeah, and I would add to that as well, it might be worth thinking about, just given our current situation, they might possibly ask questions around, you know, emerging diseases and the role of animals and in society in sort of that bigger context. They might ask, you know, what your opinions are on around the pandemic and how vets work in that, and how animals have been involved in that in whatever aspect, possibly. I'm just guessing, but you know, topical things that are happening in the world, climate change, farming, how that might be a conflict, and what you might think about around that, because there's some of these are quite hard, almost ethical questions, so it's worth thinking about some ethical dilemmas as well. Even, you know, you have a dog that needs to have a cesarean that the owners can't afford, what would you do? Those sorts of things. Just to have a think about actually what would you do in those situations, because it's not always easy to answer those questions, and I think just being ready for something like that might be helpful too.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. So when I'm going to age myself, back in the day when I was being interviewed, fox hunting was the big question that I got asked about. So every interview I got asked what was my opinion on that. So definitely ethical questions are going to be something that be prepared to answer. Ethical questions, I think, for interviews. Yeah, it's a really good tip.
Great. we've got a couple of minutes left if anyone else has any questions. I'm not sure where the recording of the sessions will be. Maybe Phoebe, could you answer that in the chat, maybe? I can't see any. Oh, here's one. Are there any really interesting advancements in the profession? Mandisa?
Good question. I think what I think this pandemic has allowed us to do is to adapt in ways that we didn't know that we didn't really perceive were possible. And I think coming out of this, we will see advancements, much more significant advancements in our professions. I think at this stage, things are in the infancy stage of advancement, but I think we are trying to advance. And I think when I say advancement there, I'm thinking of technology, but certainly in other areas in terms of sustainability and diversity, and we are really trying to advance our profession as well. And so, yes, there are advancements in the professions, but I do think what will come out, the adaptability that's coming out of this pandemic is really something to watch, and I think we will be able to see quite a lot in the future.
Thanks. We probably have time for a couple more questions just quickly. So there's a couple about zoology and working with wild animals, and also one about marine biology. So I would suggest, again, just getting experience in those fields. I think there's a lot of research, particularly around marine biology and zoology and conservation medicine. So maybe volunteering with your local wildlife centres or potentially marine biology unit academically might have some scope for work experience on that side. There was a question about what degree to become a zoo vet. So just the normal veterinary degree is all you really need. I ended up doing a master's in wild animal health in addition, but that's definitely not compulsory. You can do an internship, you can do a residency, or you can just join a practice that looks after a zoo. So all you really need is your veterinary degree, and that can open some doors. And then there's lots of further training that you can do as well. And then there's a question about what it was like after the first surgery. How you felt, and this probably applies to you too, Jack, for anaesthetising things.
Go on, Jack. You go first.
I think it was quite a scary experience knowing that once you're qualified, that it was sort of more of a responsibility because you're no longer a student, you're out in the big wide world sort of by yourself. So that was quite a scary scenario to be in, but also I knew that I had the training and the skills, so it was like a confidence but an anxious sort of feeling at the same time. So being sort of happy to speak up and say that you're not happy about something, or if something changes, and sort of collaborating with the team and the vet also in the surgery is quite an important thing to be able to do.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think for me, I had lots of support for my first surgery. So my first surgery was on a rabbit, and I was responsible for all parts of it, and I was so nervous going into it. But I had lots of support, and I think at the end, I just felt this sense of accomplishment that I hadn't felt before because I had done it, and it went well. So yeah, there was a mixture, definitely, but the overriding and overwhelming feeling was accomplishment.
Okay, there's a really good question that's come in about what is the most important quality. So should we make this our last question, Phoebe? Have we got time for that?
Yeah, if that's okay, if you make this last one.
So, I mean, there's lots of very important qualities. I would say, I think empathy with owners or with the animal carers that you're working with, because their situation, they might be seeing things from a really different perspective from yours. I think being a good team player, because you're always part of the veterinary team. You can't really do anything on your own as a vet. You really need the support of the nurses, of the animal care assistants, the receptionists, other colleagues that you're working with. I think patience and sort of perseverance, because sometimes cases aren't black and white. Mandisa, Jack, do you want to chip in a few more?
No, I think you've got it on spot on there. For me, the thing I always remind myself is that people don't care how much you know. You can be really bright and know lots. Until they know how much you care. So you really, really have to care about your patients and your clients as well. And I think that's, for me, the most important part of doing that.
I'd just say teamwork, obviously, which has been mentioned before. So working within the whole team and knowing your sort of the members of your team and their abilities, what they can do to get the most out for sort of the patients and also your clients that you're seeing as well. It's not really a job you can do if you don't care. So it gets very tough at times. So yeah.
And like I say, we can just put our, maybe Jack and Justine, we can put our social media stuff in the chat box in case people want to reach us with other questions. And please do reach out to us. We'll be very happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks for your questions and engagement, guys, as well. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much for doing that talk. It was really useful. I really enjoyed it, and I think everyone in the chat really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.